Success Criterion 2.5.8 Target Size Minimum AA. Simplified explanation. So today I thought we would talk about the Target Size Minimum AA Success Criterion 2.5.8. I think this Success Criterion is very misunderstood because it actually has to do more about spacing a target away from another interactive target more than it has to do with the size. But before that, real quick, please consider supporting me on Patreon. My Patreons get benefits such as my free accessibility courses, free accessibility lessons, and the more members I have on Patreon, the more motivated I am to keep creating accessible accessibility content. I also have a Udemy account and I have best-selling accessibility courses on the topics of ARIA, WCAG, creating accessible websites, voiceover, screen reader, and so on. All right, let's get back to the video. And let me show you what I think. So the base success criterion says the size of the target for pointer inputs is at least 24 by 24 CSS pixels, except when, and it has 5 exceptions. So yeah, it's a complicated success criterion. It's the 5 exceptions are spacing, equivalent, inline, user agent control, and essential. Now, this success criterion does not mean that all of your targets should be 24 by 24 pixels. That does not mean that's the absolute minimum. They can be smaller than that as long as they don't overlap other targets that are clickable and interactive. However, it is best practice to always make sure that your targets are 24 by 24 pixels. I even go a step further and make sure that all my targets are 44 by 44 pixels. Even though it is a AAA success criterion, but Apple's human guidelines also has 44 by 44 pixels. So basically this success criterion is if you're part of a company that they have a lot of undersized targets and you have to make them accessible. So I want to focus on the spacing exception here. The spacing exception says undersized targets, those less than 24 by 24 CSS pixels are positioned. So I have a 24 CSS pixel diameter circle is centered on the bounding box of each. The circles do not intersect another target or the circle for another undersized target. All right. So then we have exceptions for user agent control, which is the date type as an example, and then we have the essentials for like digital maps, the pins. Now let's focus on the spacing exception. There are some illustrations here in this success criterion. Basically, yes, your targets can be less than 24 by 24. If, for example, let's say that you have 6 buttons, and as long as they are 4 pixels away from each other on their right side, then they can be 20 by 20 pixels. But I think the best way to explain it is to just show you a real life example. Here I am at the Department of Oklahoma of Libraries, and we have this hero slider, which is a pattern that is very, very much encountered on the internet because a lot of webmasters are not good at their job, right? So this carousel in particular is a giant link, right? So if I press anywhere on the carousel, it will get redirected to another web page. And the carousel has a dot navigation. Dot navigation meaning that it has these dots that you can click on, and then depending on which dot you click, this image shows up. Now, carousels and sliders are the best examples of failing 2.5.8 because their dots are always undersized. I have not made a dot unless the ones I made that are not undersized. So let me measure right now those dots. If we measure each individual dot, we'll see that each of them is 12 by 12 pixels, right? The way to test that is, of course, you can test it with the inspect element in the Google Chrome. So they're 12 by 12. However, we need to measure their spacing, right? Because if their spacing is enough, they may fall under the 24 by 24 CSS pixel exception. However, there's a big exception here. The dots are overlaid on a giant link, okay? So in this case, the spacing exception does not count. These dots have to be at least 24 by 24 because they are on top of a giant link. All right. Now I want to show you a website that has actually fixed that problem, and that is California Natural Resources Agency. So they have a carousel, and that carousel has dots, but those dots are 50 by 30 pixels. So there you go. So the dots themselves are 24 by 24, but the dots are children of a button, and the button is 50 by 30. And these dots are amazing. This is how all dots should be. Now, if I were me, I would have made them 44 by 44, but clicking anywhere on the dots just shows up the different picture, and the dots are not outlined on a link. So those dots definitely meet the success criterion. Now I want to show you an example where the success criterion is not met. Here I am on the Missouri website, and we have in their footer, we have a column that says popular topics, and we have 7 links. Now these links are very much close to each other. If I get if we start measuring them, it seems like the width is almost 120 pixels and their height is 14.5 pixels. So that means that they're undersized. However, they'll only be undersized if they collide with the other links. Now the links on the right is about, I think, 300 pixels, so the links on the right don't count, but the links are very much stacked on top of each other, so there are a lot of links beneath them. Now, how do we test that? Okay, so the way I do it is I first go to where the markup is, what I do is I go to inspect element, I go into the styles section of inspect element, and then I just give them an outline. So I'm going to do something like outline 1 pixel solid white. There we go. And now each link has an outline. And if we zoom in, notice how the outlines at the bottom of each link, at the bottom and the top of each link, looks like it's double. That means it's overlapping. So this is a very quick way to check if the success criterion is being not adhered to. But I also developed another technique, which is I have coded a CSS circle, and that circle is 24 by 24 pixels, and it has an outline of 1 pixel solid red, and it is actually a circle. So what I do is I go where I want to test it, and then I go to the inspect element, okay? I go to, then right click on it, and then I click edit as HTML. And what I do is I add a span, and then I give that span the class of testing circle, okay? And then I paste and then I copy my CSS. And by the way, this code is on my GitHub, so it is free to use. And then I go to my inspect element. So I created a span called testing circle. Then I go in the element style, and then I paste the CSS, which is display block, width, height, outline, position, absolute, left, right, and top is 0, and then border radius is 50%. Okay. All right, and now I have to kind of play with the coordinates, and this is mostly for illustration. Okay, now we have our circle, which is 24 by 24, and now I want to position it exactly on top of those links, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to position it exactly that it goes there. So I'm just going to increase the left. All right, so I positioned the circle on top of the link, and the circle has a little bit of the bottom link coming out of it. So that means that those links are undersized, and they actually follow the 2.5.8 success criterion. And I'm sure, someone can come up with a better idea of testing, and this circle is mostly for like demonstration purposes. But I want to show you how to basically test if you're in doubt, and how much the success criterion is a lot about spacing as it is about size. Another example I want to show you is we're on the New York governor's website, and under the governor we have a set of social links. So we have 3 links that are just icons of Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc. So if we test our circle, if we add and it looks like these are undersized, right? They are only 17 by 16 pixels. However, we need to check how spaced they are from the other links. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit as HTML, and I'm going to create my circle. Okay, so we have our circle. Now let's bring it where the actual icons are. So remember, to test it with the circle, we need to, I don't know why I have the right attribute. Remember, to test with the circle, we need to bring it in the center of the element we're testing. Another thing I want to mention is we're using the outline CSS property, and we're not using the border CSS property, because the border CSS property adds into the size of the element, whereas the outline literally outlines it outside of the size of the element. So if we have 1 pixel of a border, our circle is actually going to be 25 by 25 pixels instead of 24 by 24. Okay, so I have placed the circle directly in the center of the X social media icon link, and it does not overlap with the links on the right. So even though this link is only 17 by 16, it does not fail Success Criterion 2.5.8. And since the link is not on top of a giant link either, that means it passes. So yeah, this is just a quick video, and I thought I would make it about the exception, about the spacing exception of the Success Criteria. And I can make more videos about either the Success Criterion, I can make more videos about the Success Criterion because it has a bunch of exceptions, such as equivalent, inline, user agent control, essential. I'm also thinking of making a course about the new WCAG Success Criterion, since target size minimum is a new WCAG Success Criterion that came out with WCAG 2.2. So yeah, let me know. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe and you like this video.